Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. Just the other day I was taking a look at the recent patch on BFA after not really having touched the game since Classic has come out, just to see what's happening, what's going on recently, and it just sort of all hits you in the face as soon as you log in. All the things that are pushed in front of you. Do this quest, this is new, all the bits highlighted on the map, arrows pointing all over the place, and to be honest, it's a whole lot to get your head around if you've taken a break from the game for the short period of time. This on top of the many different power systems, gearing and constant new adding of time-gated character-locked grinds possibly makes BFA the most casual, unfriendly version of World of Warcraft ever to have existed. And I don't want this to just be a video purely about bashing BFA, just to draw some comparisons of the game now and back in Classic. I know this is somewhat of a departure from my usual Classic focus stuff, but at the end of the day I've been playing Classic for about 7 months and retail for about 15 years, so give me a break. Also, I'll try and keep this fairly basic for BFA 2 and not go into crazy detail, but just give you some ideas, a bit of a taster, rather than a full 3-course meal, so to speak. It's funny, isn't it? Back before Classic released, Vanilla was always seen as back when the game was hardcore, and the only guys in full tier sets or at high ranks were the mega basement dwelling nerds living off noodles and the promise of more pixelated items the next day. People who had the visible achievements in game were really looked up to as gamer gods. And you know what? It's not entirely untrue. And it wasn't just a question of ability or time, but just dedication. It was a new game back then. I can bet your average Joe by today's standards would have been better than most of the guys rocking full epics back then. Time, private servers, and internet publicly available information has taught us much. That of course with us playing de facto stronger classes by means of talents and gearing through the 1.12 itemization decision made by Blizzard. Though, to be fair, the top guilds in Classic these days are still putting in mad hours to ensure they put themselves in the best position to perform, and whatever you may think of the ranking system, you have to give it to the guys capable of achieving rank 13 or even 14, that it's still a serious effort and a commitment in doing so. Also, you need many hours in gold farming to sort those raid consumables out each week, though this can be no-lifed for a short period of time, and you're good sort of until the end of the expansion. After all, we know what consumables are best for each patch. Unlike retail, we have a much better chance of preparing. All of this though is nothing in comparison to what the hardcore top level players have to do in retail. Remember the start of Legion, guilds would level up 2, 3 or even 4 of the same class in hope of receiving a best in slot legendary, since your first one had a much higher chance to drop. Get unlucky? Well, you may as well just delete that character, it's not going to be of any use any longer. Remember the grind world first guilds had to do in 7.2 to get Concordance of Legion 4 before Mythic Week opened? This was a massive upgrade to performance for all specializations and was mandatory for them and meant many hours of grinding out repeatable content. Even in BFA, these guys are having to gear multiple characters just in case one boss fight looks as though it may require class stacking, instead of just bringing 20 plus warriors like you can on Classic and calling it a day. But we aren't here to just compare for the top level, as let's be real, that's the 0.1%. An interesting percentage to look at, sure, but not something that will ever concern many of us. What I want to look at today is the casual side. First of all, what's a casual? Depends for different people. I think generally speaking you can see it as somebody who plays the game infrequently, maybe less invested. Sometimes it's somebody who really is into the game but is just limited by time constraints of real life. In any event, there are many areas where BFA is a bit more difficult of an environment to get into, despite all of Blizzard's attempts to create content that could cater to this type of person. So let's have a little look into BFA, and honestly the most convoluted and strange gearing system that Blizzard has ever devised. All of this stemming from a rush beta and ignored feedback. Too many things were set in motion and Blizzard had to sort of hope they worked. And they've spent the whole expansion trying to fix a mess that realistically doesn't have a fix until they throw it all in the bin and start again, aka Shadowlands. So imagine we get to level cap. Well, it's time to start gearing up, Sunshine. How do we go about that? In Classic we have just gearing, I guess. There isn't too much to say. You do dungeons, raids, quests, PvP, and you get upgrades. Upgrades are largely pretty easy to identify so long as you have a rough idea what stats your character uses, your hit cap and so on. I think most people could identify an upgrade in Classic at the glance of an item, and that makes it a good thing as it's quite intuitive. In BFA, oh boy, here we go. Get your lottery tickets ready, folks. First of all, we have the Azurite armor. These are pieces of armour with very powerful effects on them which directly affect your performance in a number of different ways. They could just give you a flat extra bunch of stats on a proc, or modify an ability in some way, and these bonuses scale with the item level of that piece of armour. You need 3 bits of Azurite armour, and each new patch, more and more is added to the pool, so each patch you're regrinding armour to get the same, slightly more powerful bonuses that you already have 3 times over. Thankfully, Azurite armour bonuses are not RNG, they're set in stone, so you can, through various means, target a specific item. They do take a long time to get, however, even through deterministic means. This is the first box to check in your gearing. Next up, essences, box number 2. These can make even more of an impact than your Azurite armour. These are totally non-optional if you want to perform at any decent level on your character. These have 4 levels on them, 1 being the weakest and 3 being the strongest. 4 is the same as 3, it just has a cosmetic effect. These are gained through pretty much any activity that exists in World of Warcraft at endgame. Islands, raiding, world PvP. Some of them you need to reach a certain point with new reputations. Some of them you need to grind honour in battlegrounds for hours and hours. Actually, that sounds a bit more like classic than I originally thought. Oh, and by the way, these aren't account-wide unlocks at this point either. Want an ult? Go regrind Revered with that faction again. Complete that quest series with a dozen quests again. Okay, you get the idea with essences, but wait, there's more. Box number 3, Corruption. Added last patch, yet another layer to the gearing system. I hope you still have those lottery tickets because you're going to need some good RNG to do good damage these days. Since the last patch, items in battle for Azeroth can roll a Corruption, which is an extra effect on that item. Imagine if items in Classic could randomly roll plus 2% hit on them. It's that kind of power level, but even higher, way higher in fact. Corruptions can add so much damage they do over half your total damage passively. So how do you get these? Well, they are random upon random upon random. First of all, an item has to roll a Corruption. Next of all, it has to be the correct Corruption that you want. Next, it has to roll at the correct level of Corruption, as they vary from 1 to 3. So yeah, if you want an ult, the number of hurdles you have to jump over the gearing system is absolutely absurd at the moment in BFA. It's the most tedious it's ever been by a massive margin, and the reason so many competitive players are having to sink an enormous amount of time into repeating content just in the hope that they're blessed by the RNG with the perfect item. It kind of reminds me of Diablo really, but everything just takes longer. For a casual player in Classic, you get your best in slot, and that's kind of it. The only RNG is the item actually dropping. And sure, there are upgrades from your raid content, but you aren't going to go out of your way to refarm essentially the same item exactly, just with boosted stats. We still have tier sets, which make quite an attractive option to raid just to complete those, and then you have them forever, and they've remained relevant for quite a long time too in Classic. The only time when there is non-raid content to refarm will be the new items in Phase 5 from dungeons like Blackrock Depths or Blackrock Spire, which are coming into the game. Even then, it's a one-time thing, and if you've been playing the game the whole time up to then, you may just not need them anyway. And sure, there is a jump in power from raid to raid in Classic, just as there is in retail, but the jump in BFA at the moment is insane. The gearing there is more or less seasonal at this point. With each new patch, the item level jump is 30. That's the difference of an item received in Looking for Raid, which is designed in a way that you sort of really have to struggle to lose, and Heroic, where you do need some level of communication and ability between your players, especially on later bosses in the instance. Meaning each new patch, you are miles behind in gear again. Is Blackwing Lure gear that much better than Molten Core gear? Sure, it's there, but not that level of better. The gear gaps become more and more noticeable in Classic with each raid, but that's kind of required in order to make the linear raiding path work, especially since ways of getting raid quality gear outside of a raid basically just rank 13 or rank 14, which a tiny percentage of the player base will ever achieve. So on top of regrinding a very complicated and time-consuming gear system on each character, you also have to regrind the ability to use your flying mounts. This is a meta achievement called Pathfinding, which basically requires you to have fully explored the whole continent, completed many quests, and reached Revered with 2 reputations, which, as I'm sure you realise, means days and weeks of daily quests to unlock something you had already unlocked, the previous expansion, and the one before that actually. Imagine if in Phase 5 you lost the ability to use epic mounts, and you had to get Revered with a Cenarian Circle before you could use them again. It just doesn't make any sense. Speaking of dailies, daily content for Battle for Azeroth makes you feel like you could be missing out on world quests or objectives and so on, aka chores. World of Daily Craft, Come Back Tomorrow MMOs, whatever you want to call them. Ever since TBC, daily quests have piled up more and more as a cornerstone of World of Warcraft, and in BFA there are a huge amount too. New factions brought in midway through the expansion for Mechagon and Nazjatar, on top of world quests for standard reputations and the daily objectives. This has even extended to weekly stuff in Battle for Azeroth. Get your islands cap, complete a Mythic Plus. The weekly bonus quest can award heroic level items as well. World bosses, this isn't just a carrot on a stick anymore, it's like a whole bundle of carrots flying about in your face. In Classic, content is more of your own making, and it tends to be the case once you have done something, that's it. No necessity to go and do the same thing again and again. It's what you make of it. And I've said it before, but in BFA, the game tells you what you want to do. In Classic, you tell the game what you want to do. Classic, in my opinion, is a far better choice for a person actually playing casually. The long-term goals are there, and the goalposts aren't constantly moving and shifting every few months. What do you guys think? Do I have any BFA exiles here, or even some of you guys that may be more experienced than me in the matter? Let me know below. As always, I do hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. If you like what you see, give the video a like and subscribe, as there's plenty more to come. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Take care. Bye.